When everyone had gone to bed at my in-laws' house, I was brought to a small, dusty storage room.
What are we doing here, Susan?
My mother-in-law gave me an evil look.
Don't pretend you don't know. This you're sleeping tonight. 33.
Oh, but I'm gonna sleep with my husband. 3.
There's no bed for a hideous woman.
Hideous?
Yes, you are. Here, take the newspaper. Sleep on it.
Susan took a bundle of old newspaper corner of the shed and shoved it to smirk. Why? What did I do to deserve such from her? I felt the back of my nose burning in sadness. I had no choice but to answer in a voice.
Understood.
After she left, I tried to get out, but it seemed as though something was propping the door open and it wouldn't budge. Giving up, spread a newspaper on dusty wooden floor and sat down to, I couldn't stand it anymore. I would have rather left my husband than be treated like that. Just as I was agonizing, I heard a sound outside and the door suddenly opened. Standing there was an unexpected person. My name is Joy. I'm 27 years old. I met my husband, Jarvis, at work for his affectionate and honest personality. After 2 years of dating, we got engaged. Before visiting his family for the first time, he gave me a heads up.
My family has a long lineage in the countryside. My grandma is 80 now and in charge house. She is a pretty strict lady.
I wonder if she'd like me.
Besides, my dad and mom are friends, so don't worry.
I was anxious all the way until I got there. His house was located in a vast landscape with acres of green field. It was well maintained and had a good appearance.
Hello, we're here.
Jarvis called out in the driveway. Mom came out of the house. I greeted her nervously and handed gift.
My goodness, it's so nice to finally meet you.
She was amiable, just as I had heard beforehand. I was ushered into the house with a sense of some relief. There I was met by a dignified elder and a gentle-looking man. I knew they were his grandmother and...
Oh, welcome. Come, sit down.
We sat down in front of the grandmother his dad, Dan, suggested. Susan brought glasses of lemonade to us.
This is Joy. We're planning to get this year.
When he introduced me to everyone, satisfying.
She's wonderful. I'm glad for you.
In contrast to her cheerful parents, Grandma just looked at me silently. Time passed joyfully, while I nervously answered questions from his parents. When I sipped the lemonade, I tasted strange and involuntarily gasped. To put it simply, it was extremely... It tasted like seawater, and I could only gag.
Are you all right?
Dan looked at me with concern. I just laughed it off and told myself, maybe it was the normal flavor in that batch. I didn't want to offend the family something strange. Suddenly, Susan changed the conversation.
If you guys are getting married, would Six like to meet your parents as well? When would be a good time?
I only have my mother.
Her eyes widened for a moment. One of Grandmother's eyebrows seemed to be missing. My dad passed away in a car accident when he was very young. Since then, my mom raised me by herself. I explained to them what I had told the past.
Well, you two must have gone through a lot.
Dan gave me a sympathetic smile.
Then we must make your mother happy.
Son, you must take good care of Joy. Davis nodded earnestly. His comments filled me with warmth. When it was time for us to leave, I realized that I had left my shoes at the entrance. A sharp, stabbing pain shot up from... I found a small piece of glass stuck in my foot. Ouch!
Honey, are you okay?
Jarvis was concerned, and Susan also, at my feet.
Oh my God, how did it get into you? Are you all right?
No worries. I'm fine.
I forced a smile and left the house. On the way home, Davis started a conversation.
You must have been nervous all day, you. They were all happy with you, though.
I'm not sure. Your grandma didn't to me. 33.
That means it's all good. She's very direct, so if she didn't something, she would have said it in there.
I hope so too.
I still felt something strange. The odd, salty lemonade and the piece in my shoe bothered me. It didn't mean that I could say anything doubtful about his family. I kept my discomfort in my heart. After that, my mom met everyone, and Davis and I registered our marriage. My mom cried and rejoiced over it, assured me that I made the right decision. We had a normal married life for a while after that. Jarvis didn't mind that I kept work, had a dual income. One day, a package arrived at our door from Susan. Inside were some vegetables. I immediately called to thank her. After a few rings, she picked up the,
Yes? Hello?
Hi, Susan. Your package has arrived safely. Thank you.
Oh, good. It's not for you.
I couldn't believe my ears. She snickered into the phone.
I sent them to Davis. If you eat them, 11 be very mad.
She was friendly and kept a smile, or when she was at the wedding. I was confused by the sarcastic tone to that.
I can't believe you actually got Ma the way. You knew you were not welcome, did you?
What do you mean by that?
I put salt in my drink and even with the glass. You should have known. You're so stupid.
I had a hunch that those were hairs. I was stunned by the shocking revel. She continued to press the point.
I don't welcome a girl raised by a single parent like you in my family. Grandma didn't say anything to you, did she? That's because she didn't accept you.
Fix? No.
She didn't want to say anything in Dan and Jarvis. But it was obvious that she was not with you. You should remember that.
Tears welled up in my eyes, and I sank into the phone. Hearing that, she continued with satisfaction.
If you tell Davis about this call, I'll make sure you regret it. I don't think he will believe you. So please divorce him as soon as...
She hung up the phone.
All I could do was stand there in shock. When Jarvis came home, I couldn't tell what had happened. He was delighted to see the package, not doubt his mother's kindness. There was no way I could tell him that. I seldom saw my in-laws, who lived far away, so I didn't have to deal with Susan face to face. Instead, she called me frequently, made harsh remarks every time. Also, she made sure to call when Jar not around. She was not pleased with my single upbringing and eventually started to make fun of my mother.
A woman raised in a lower-class single-parent household is not good for my son. You were probably living in poverty, you. Your mother is just as bad as you are, for a lowly woman like you.
After dealing with her harassment for so long, I was so stressed that I lost my job.
Honey, haven't you lost weight recently?
I rushed to answer Davis' question.
Oh, really? Maybe it's because I've a diet lately. 33.
He was worried about me, but I could brush it off. As the seasons passed, and when summer approached, he asked me,
Hey, let's take a short break at parents' place.
Good idea. I'm looking forward to them again.
He was excited to return home after a while. Not wanting to put a damper on his, I played along with him. In truth, Susan's harassment had not ceased. I was fighting a stomach burn that intensified as the trip approached. The day had arrived, and Susan put on her usual evil smile and welcomed us joyfully. I forced a smile and asked her. When I greeted my grandmother-in-law, Grace, she spoke to me for the first time.
Welcome back, my dear. Make yourself at home.
Thank you.
Dan, on the other hand, was as friar ever. He welcomed us with freshly picked watermelons and cold drinks. If I stayed close to Jarvis, I wouldn't be bullied by Susan. I stayed within his sight as much as possible. It was effective, although some glared at me secretly. She didn't do outwardly terrible. I wanted to finish my trip in peace, couldn't ignore helping her clean up dinner. I had no choice but to be alone with the kitchen. As soon as we were away from the others, he threatened me in a low voice.
What on earth do you think you're sticking to Jarvis all day? I told you to divorce him as soon as possible.
I have no intention of leaving him.
I retorted in a stronger tone.
If possible, I want you to accept me.
You're so brave for someone who comes from a low-class single-parent home. You even dare to show up here again. To teach you a lesson.
Just as I was about to talk back, her expression tightened, looking behind me. I turned around and saw Grace stand corridor.
Oh, are you going to bed now?
Yes, I am. 33.
Grace stared intently at me, and Suze bit her lip before slowly disappearing into the room. Once she was gone, Susan resumed browsing through her bookshelves. I had to endure it until I finished up. When I was done, I returned to the one room. Jarvis was drunk from drinking with.
Hone, I'm going to bed. You should too.
Then Susan immediately spoke up.
She said she wanted to look at the album, so I'm thinking of showing.
Of course, I never said anything like that. And Jarvis had every reason not to believe me.
Okay, so can I go first?
Yes, I'll join you later. 33.
As soon as he left, Dan got up, said goodnight, and walked out of the living room. Once we were alone, Susan ordered me to the storage room at the back of. It was cluttered with boxes and old with a naked light bulb on. It was dim, small, and smelled of dust.
What are we doing here? Oh, but I'm going to join Jarvis in his guest room.
She gave me an evil look. She thrust a bundle of old newspapers into my hands and said, "Here, take these."
Understood.
Have a good sleep until then.
She left in a good mood without hid. Grin. I tried to get out of there, but something was propped against the door that wouldn't budge. Giving up, spread a newspaper on dusty wooden floor and sat down to, after what must have been 2 hours, Susan snoring in the distance. I couldn't sleep at all and sat in storage room crying. Her bully was becoming more than I endure. I would rather left Jarvis than like that. Just as I was agonizing, I heard a sound outside and the door opened.
Grace?
There she was, staring down at me. Sharp eyes.
What in the world are you doing here? Well, I guess I know. 33.
She wiped my tear-stained face with her wrinkled hands. I was pulled up to my feet and led down the hallway. Then she suddenly shouted loudly,
Get up! All of you, and go to the room.
Jarvis was the first to react to her. He looked at my miserable face in tears and then looked at Grace in surprise.
What's going on, Grandma?
Next, Dan came out to his bedroom.
Mom, what's wrong with you at this night? Are you crying, Joy?
Finally, Susan came out looking pale. When everyone gathered in the living, Grace sat at the head of the table, me to sit next to her. Jarvis and Dan looked confused.
Dear, please tell us honestly what happened today.
She spoke in a stern voice.
But I'm not sure if it's a good idea to use this method.
Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done.
Okay, Susan told me that there was no bed hideous woman like me. She gave me a bundle of newspapers in the storage.
Jarvis was astonished.
She's been harassing me all this time. She called me a low-class single-parent child. She even made fun of my mother, which was really hurtful.
That's outrageous. What were you thinking, Susan?
Dan grimaced at her, but she could only tremble her lips. Grace said to Dan,
It's all true. I found her in the... I also heard with my own ears Susan saying terrible things to her in the kitchen at dinner.
Dan and Jarvis stared at Susan in shock. Grace glared and yelled at her.
What do you think about single mothers? I raised Dan with my own hands alone. She's a decent girl, you know. How could you do such a terrible thing to her? You are the hideous one.
Then Susan took off the mask of a G and wise mother she had been wearing, screamed hysterically.
Shut up! Shut up, all of you! It's your fault. You and Jarvis have been flattering her. She's a stupid bitch who grew up in a single-parent home.
Hey,
Dan tried to stop her, but she kept.
Just throw her out of the house right now. I despise her. I'm more important to you guys than woman. Right.
Then Grace shouted at her to be quiet, and the room fell silent at once. She turned to Dan.
You see, this is who you've been made. I've been warning you for a long time, haven't I?
Mom?
She is all about appearances, but actually does is spiteful. I have never seen such a malicious. I don't intend to share the house W anymore. If you don't want to get rid of her, need to leave together. 33.
Dan turned to Susan with a red face.
You've always been self-centered. Never thought you could be this cruel. Now that I know your true nature, I no longer see you as my wife.
What are you talking about?
She couldn't hide her surprise to 6. With an unlikely stern attitude, she turned to Jarvis with pleading.
Your father's being horrible to me. Say something to him. 33.
Give me a break. 33.
His normally mild voice had a threatening tone to it, which made her jerk.
What did you do to my loving wife? I will never forgive you. I don't want to be in contact with now on. Don't ever show your face to me.
Oh no, what happened?
Her knees gave up, and she fell to. Everyone looked at her with disdain. One consoled her. Instead, Dan and Jarvis apologized repeatedly. I also apologized to them for not telling them about her sooner. And so the night turned into dusk, and Dan saw us off in the morning. Right before we left, Grace said to,
This is your home too. When you come back next time, she gone, so don't worry. 33.
I nodded and gave her a tight hug into the car. I was told that Dan later divorced. He had been fed up with her selfish, inconsiderate ways. They were able to divorce with only minimum division of property. After being kicked out, Susan was away by her parents. And she was live alone in a small apartment. She's been a housewife for a long time, but now she has a part-time job. She must be struggling to adjust to life. She will likely spend lonely nights alone, but it's all her fault. I, on the other hand, have been relieved of my stress, and to my surprise, I am feeling more relaxed than ever before. Since the incident, Jarvis has become even more affectionate to me. Dan and Grace have been very caring, so I've been able to enjoy a relaxed pregnancy. I will go back and show Grace her great-grandchild once the baby is born. Right now, I am really interested in going there.